actually great to be running one of our Social Enterprise Scotland webinars, but be joined by colleagues working across the border. I think we've always got a lot we can learn from each other, and that's very much kind of what we're hoping from this session here. So we're going to hear, first of all, just a really quick intro from Tracy. So RBS sponsor our Places programme. So rightly, we're just joined by Tracy for a really quick intro. And then to get into kind of the meat of the discussion, really, we wanted to invite some people that have been Places, social enterprise Places for a while, to give us a sense of what difference that accolade had made to their place, to organisations that operate in their area. And so I'm really delighted today to be joined by three speakers. First of all, Gareth Hart from Plymouth Social Enterprise Network is going to talk us through kind of the impact of the Places programme there. Then we're going to be joined by Jon Monk from the business group in Salford. And last but not least, Sarah Crawley from the Initiative for Social Entrepreneurs down in Birmingham. So really looking forward to today's session, and I'll hand straight over to Tracy to get us started, and I'll just keep coming in and bringing in the new speakers as we go through. So thank you everyone and welcome.
Thank you very much, Naomi. So yes, I'm Tracy Thomson and I'm a loans officer for Royal Bank of Scotland Social and Community Capital. So I work for an independent charity that has been funded and supported by the bank in order to help social enterprises and community businesses through lending when mainstream banks can't. We're the only bank that offers this facility, so I provide grant bridging, lending for growth or capital expenditure. And we were set up over 21 years ago, supporting organisations across the UK to thrive and support their local communities. And hello to the rest of my panel members. I was there when Salford launched as a place a number of years ago, so great to see some familiar faces. So Royal Bank of Scotland is proud to support the Places programme as it spotlights where social enterprise is thriving, celebrates their achievements while supporting them to grow. At Royal Bank of Scotland, we're here to remove barriers to enterprise and help the economy to build back better. In order to serve females, Black, Asian and ethnic minority communities and social enterprises who traditionally face the highest barriers to entry. So we do this by working with external partners from both the private and public sector through collaboration to deliver educational programmes and game-changing interventions, of which Social Enterprise Places programme is one. When Alison Rose set out our purpose-led strategy last year, it's fair to say that no one quite envisaged the year that was to come. Proudly got my vaccination yesterday. Feel like I've been punched in the arm, but it's well worth it. So it is important that the Places programme continues to highlight the social enterprise and what it plays in supporting their communities, our communities, and this programme makes sure that their work is highlighted. I'm here also to plug two free awards. So NatWest SE Awards, which is the NatWest SE 100. It was devised in 2010 by Pioneers Post and NatWest to recognise and reward the leading 100 social enterprises across the UK each year. There are 6 categories this year: growth, impact, resilience, leadership, social investment, and a new one, climate. Each category will have an award winner, and the closing date is the 25th of April 2021. If you go to the Pioneers web page, it will give you ideas on how to apply, and you will see some of the organisations that have succeeded last year and the previous years. And as I say, it's free to nominate and free to attend as and when we're allowed to, likely be online. We also have nominations open until the 5th of July 2021 for the NatWest Every Woman's Award, celebrating female entrepreneurial success, which is achievement over diversity of the theme of this year, with one of the awards for the most inspirational and successful female founder of a social enterprise who's combined strong community benefit with our sustainable business model. Again, another free award. We encourage you to nominate these strong women that you know running organisations right across the UK. And I'd love to see a fantastic representation come from Scotland. Thank you very much, Naomi. Over to you.
Thank you, Tracy. I mean, I know you've touched a bit on some of the awards there, and for me, the Places programme is very much about helping to give that boost to places, but also that recognition. It's really important, I think, that we celebrate success and help build and grow our social enterprises. And looking at doing that, I guess, in a geographical sense is the whole point behind, I guess, the Places programme. So really pleased to now hear from Gareth and the Plymouth Social Enterprise Network experience in the Places programme. And I know, Gareth, having heard you speak before, you'll have lots to say in terms of the difference it's made to you. So thank you very much for joining us.
Great, no problem. Thank you very much, Naomi. I'm conscious of my picture on there. My beard's grown quite a lot since then, I think a year. So barbers are open, I can go and get a trim. What a great place to be. I really appreciate the invite to talk today. I think we've obviously at the other end of the country, and it's a real privilege to speak in this event, because actually I look to Scotland for a lot of the amazing stuff that you're doing around social enterprise. And I'll talk in a minute about our social enterprise strategy that we're developing as a way of looking forward for social enterprise. And actually we've borrowed a lot from your work, and I've been to the Social Enterprise World Forum and other events and really impressed by what's happening in Scotland around the social enterprise community. So I'm Gareth Hart. I'm one of the directors of Plymouth Social Enterprise Network. I was the elected chair of the organisation for 7 years, from 2013 to 20. I'm also the director of my own social enterprise called Iridescent Ideas. We're a business advice company sort of supporting and trying to create a more socially enterprising, greener and fairer economy. As you probably know, in 2013, Plymouth became the UK's first social enterprise city with Bristol. And that status has really been an amazing piece of work. It's actually my proudest working moment in my whole career, you know, getting that and what that's led to for Plymouth, and particularly for social enterprise down here. It's really helped galvanise the social enterprise movement and build the ecosystem for social enterprise support. And the headline sort of issues are that, you know, over the last 5 years, social enterprise has grown in the city of Plymouth. There are more social enterprises, they employ more people, they're working in the most disadvantaged parts of the city and bring more much needed income into the city's communities. But I think it goes beyond that. You know, just the stats are one thing, and I'll talk about the stats. It's actually showing us that this better way of doing business isn't a work of fiction. It's real, it's right here, it's growing in Plymouth. And Plymouth's, I don't know if you don't know much about Plymouth, it's a city of incredible maritime heritage, nearly 300,000 people, home in the sort of Royal Navy, one of the biggest ports in Europe down here. And last year we had we remember the sailing of the Mayflower to America, which had profound consequences. We're also the city of the best gin in the world. I highly recommend Plymouth gin. You know, but this location, right deep in the far southwest, it's a bit of a blessing and a curse for us. That amazing maritime environment, a gateway to tourist areas when the economy reopens in southwest, but geographically isolated from London. I think there's some parallels there we can draw. Difficult social issues here, wide health inequalities, high levels of personal debt, and some of the highest levels of child poverty. And some parts of our cities are in the top 10 most deprived wards in the country. I mean, in Plymouth right now, we think there are about 200 social enterprises, employing around 9,000 people, and then bringing in £600 million a year to the city. They were the pre-COVID figures. What we're seeing during this last year is quite a lot of resilience in the social enterprise sector. Actually, there's a handful of social enterprises that are two of the 5 biggest employers in the city are social enterprises, the universities and Live Well Southwest, a big, huge health and care spin out. And there's sort of some things we know, not just particularly on the actual impact of social enterprise cities. So getting that badge was really interesting. I mean, I think there's some other great speakers you'll hear from later on. There's, I think, now over 30 social enterprise places in the country, in the UK. And millions of people now live in a social enterprise place, and it's been an incredible journey for us. And some of the sort of headline impacts for us have been, it's just brought lots of interest and money to the area. I mean, at least £6 million of external investment has come in to Plymouth from people like Esme Fairbairn, Rank Foundation. The council itself put up a load of cash for a social investment fund. It's now a co-op development fund, Power to Change, and others. We have used the Places badge to drive a lot of policy work with the local council and our local enterprise partnership. You know, we're now represented at the highest levels of economic policy making. So I think getting that badge was a real flagship for the council. It's a really interesting partnership actually between the City Council, a cooperative council, and the Social Enterprise Network, and the private sector were involved as well. We're now building this greener, fairer concept through an economic recovery plan. And actually that plan is sort of right at the high level. It's really interesting. The statement is the plan must address structural inequalities in the city and place a fairer, a greener future at the heart of our recovery. We want to grow back better. So that's the council leader in Plymouth saying that. And we're proud that we've actually influenced that debate, particularly around the inclusive economics agenda, community wealth building. We don't actually call it that in Plymouth. But at the political level, we're well plugged in, and that's partly to this places movement. This place is bad. It's given us that credibility, that confidence to really sort of mobilise. But also the ecosystem stuff. It's brought business advice. It's got a media interest, leadership. All 3 universities are recognised as social enterprises in the city. It's good engagement around social value and procurement. We've got a Spend for Plymouth programme that's really predicated on spending with social enterprises and with the social value in mind. It's just, I'd highly recommend it. If you're a town or city or a place thinking about joining the movement, I'd absolutely recommend it, because one of the really, really strong things is this wider movement of 30 odd places across the country that we meet regularly. I talk to Sarah and John and others on a regular basis to just share just stories and information and knowledge and ideas, and when pinching ideas, and it's just a fantastic movement. The sense of solidarity it gives me, we go back to our day jobs in Plymouth. The solidarity I get from this movement is absolutely really, really profound. It's really kind of, it makes a difference on a daily basis. So, there are some challenges still in Plymouth around, getting more public awareness. Some parts of the public sector down here, particularly the MOD, big employer in the city, don't really recognise social value, social enterprise as much as I think they should or could. But fundamentally, we're trying to build a social enterprise strategy. We've just published a 5-year strategy, as I say, based very much on the Scottish example, recognising that those problems we face, like climate change, inequality, poor mental health, racism and enduring poverty, are symptoms of the way we organise the economy. And actually, we do need to rethink. And I think social enterprise and the social enterprise places movement is showing the way and leading the way on how we can do that. So yeah, we've got a lot to do. We want this inclusive economy, one that's productive and prosperous for us all. And I think it's social enterprises that are doing that right at the heart of trying to build back better. And as shown by this event, hopefully a lot of interest in wider Scotland and across the world, actually, in this social enterprise places movement. So with these partnerships, I think we can really create a vibrant social economy and change the world for the better. And the place flag badge is an accolade, is a symbol of us doing that. I highly recommend it, and I'm really pleased to be here. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Gareth. That was you brought us back onto our time schedule as well. So that's always encouraging. I was really encouraged as I heard you speak, and I know you've got other meetings you might have to dash off to at 12:15 today. So I was just conscious of making sure that we just, I guess, put a question to you before just moving on to our other speakers, just in case you have to suddenly leave us. We know it's not because you don't want to be here, but we've all got so many different appointments. I wanted to perhaps, the big thing that strikes me, particularly given as you spoke, I mean, there was lots in there, the influence on the media, on procurement, the ability to bring in additional finance to the area. And I'm sure some of these will be familiar themes as we go through. But I wanted to perhaps pick up, you talked quite a lot about your involvement in the economic recovery plan. And I guess every community, every city, every place is currently having to really look at that, whatever size you are at the moment in terms of that post-recovery. I just wonder, in terms of that ability to be kind of recognised as a place and as a group, do you think that's made it easier for the local authority and for people to kind of understand who to come and speak to within the social enterprise movement in your area? And as a consequence, it's perhaps made it easier to involve you in some of that? Or do you think some of that would have happened anyway?
Oh, that's a big question. Yeah, and apologies, I got another. I'm doing back-to-back Zoom meetings today, so I've got another call scheduled. I think I suppose yes. In simple terms, I think so going back to rewind to 2013, or even before that, the social enterprise movement was really sort of I don't know, not underconfident, but was quite fragmented. The Social Enterprise Network, which I represent, has done done an amazing job of bringing that sector together advocating for that sector, and then getting the Social Enterprise Places badge in 2013 was a really, really important moment. It suddenly shone a spotlight on social enterprise. And then from that has led to much more credibility, particularly with the local council. I mean, we're very lucky that the council down here is a cooperative council. They really get social enterprise cooperatives and community businesses. It's embedded in the manifesto of the local party, it's a Labour Party that runs the council here at the moment. It's got an election coming up any minute, and it could lose that. It's got a majority of 2. It's very, very fragile, and Plymouth swings both ways, right and left, very often. But certainly that credibility then led to things like us being invited to join the Plymouth Growth Board. Plymouth Growth Board is that body that oversees economic policy in the city. They realised that social enterprise was big business down here, and we were taken seriously. And that I think the place movement made that difference. And then from then, now we go into the 7 years later, this recovery model. We're doing a lot of work on inclusive economics, inclusive growth, and I chair the inclusive growth group in Plymouth. I don't think I'll be doing that unless this places thing hadn't happened. So I think it has made a difference. Some things along those lines may have happened anyway, but actually I think it has made a significant difference. And certainly that resurgam plan I talked about, this putting Build Back Better, Greener, Fairer at the heart, I'm proud we've had a strong role in influencing that. There's a resurgam charter we brought out, which is a badge any business can get, which shows they are paying their workers fairly. They are looking at things like gender pay gap and environmental impact and supply chains. There's 112 sign-ups in a week, and half of those are social enterprises in the city. We are really leading the way as a movement to build back greener and fairer. And I think we're showing Plymouth, a lot of other businesses, that we mean business.
We ran a session actually last week on fair work. It's such an important agenda, I think, for us all as we come out of this. I think lots of us have seen inequality. I mean, COVID's kind of really brought that to the fore. I think lots of our social enterprises were already talking about it, but I think it's had a much broader recognition post-COVID. And I think it's just really interesting to see that actually through your involvement in those forums, it's not just perhaps creating a direct opportunities for social enterprises, but having that impact or that influence maybe over other businesses in terms of what they then look at to build a place in a much stronger way. So it's quite interesting what you were just talking about, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, we've got to look at this as in the wide round of engaging the standard private sector and the public sector and the universities and building that partnership for this sort of greener, fairer future we all want. And social enterprise is a key part of that. But actually, if we want this more inclusive, prosperous economy, like you say, these inequalities that were already deeply entrenched are intensifying because of COVID. And how the government is using the Build Back Better language that comes from someone else. There's all sorts of, it's deeply political for me, deeply political and philosophical, and that's where you've got to engage at those levels. And but if a Conservative council gets in, we've got good relationships with them. We will talk to them about entrepreneurship and business and job creation, and it's a different kind of language, but we have to be savvy about how we work in this build a greener, fairer. What we find though is in the mainstream business community, maybe slightly surprisingly, they're all up for it. They're really, really keen to do, most of them anyway. I'm sure there are some ones out there that aren't.
Absolutely. I mean, I always say, regardless of what sector we work for, we're all individuals who want to live in a better world. And I think, when we start to think of each other as individuals rather than always just which sector we work from, we can really build places strongly as well. So I'm hopeful. I mean, you may not be able to stay till our questions at the end, but if anyone's got anything they want to ask Gareth directly, please, use our chat function as we go through. I'm sure Gareth would just respond. And we will, of course, always share these webinar recordings afterwards as well. So I'm going to introduce our next speaker, if I may now. Thank you so much, Gareth. That was great. I'm going to introduce Jon, giving us a different perspective from Salford. I'm sure we'll have some common themes that really come through. And what I thought I'd do is then bring in Sarah, and then we'll do the Q&A to both yourself and Sarah at the end, because we can have it more as a kind of chat as well then. So over to you, Jon.
Cool, thank you. Probably will repeat some of what Gareth has said, but I guess that is a good thing in terms of reinforcing what has been useful for us as a place. So I work for an organisation in Salford called the Business Group. We are a group of more than 1,000 members from across the city. Salford is one of 10 places in Greater Manchester. So we say sometimes the best city in Greater Manchester. Obviously, Manchester is right next door to us. Places scheme has been really good for us in terms of what it's helped us with and why we think it's good. It's given us a better idea of what we've got in the city in terms of social enterprise. So what are we dealing with? How many are there? What sectors are they working in? How are they financed? How much of their income comes from trading and all that sort of stuff? It's helped us as a business support provider to tailor our support to make sure that it works for social enterprises, to make sure it's effective for them. It's definitely, and these are in no particular order, but it has definitely empowered residents of our city to set up social enterprises, to formalise some of their community work or community groups, and therefore to help them to access more funding as well. I think importantly for myself and senior colleagues, I guess, from organisations like ours across the city, it gives us a reason to keep in contact about relevant issues that affect social enterprises, issues that affect community businesses and all those sorts of people who operate in that broad sphere of social enterprise. It's meant we've had really exciting projects to work on together. It's meant we've had really difficult projects to work on together as well. Some have been effective, some haven't. We've run a campaign across the city around buying local, social and ethical. Alongside that, it's a PPL funded project which we work with SE UK, and I know Sarah has been involved in this as well, to encourage more people to buy social. So bringing that type of project, it's been pretty difficult, don't get me wrong, but bringing that to our city has really helped our social enterprises across the board, really. Of course, it's helped in terms of us getting investment and funding. Probably not quite as much as Gareth said down in Plymouth, but we think upwards of £1 million. But it also helps us to get money that we can spend in a way that is relevant for social enterprises, which is not always the same as it is for more mainstream stuff. One of the things I like the most about it, which I think is the most effective of this Places network, is learning from other places. And I don't know if Gareth did say this or not, but nicking ideas from other people, seeing what they've done, seeing how they've provided support, what's included in their inclusive economy strategy and all that sort of stuff. That I think is the most important aspect for me. In terms of policy influence, again, we have an inclusive economy strategy in Salford. You're really disappointed that it's becoming termed sensible socialism. But we've had a Labour council. We probably will always have a Labour council. I know Gareth said they work with Tories. I don't work with Tories. They decimated this part of the country in the 80s, and unfortunately we don't need to engage with them. But we do get to work with the council and influence their things like their inclusive economy strategy, their skills and work strategy and all that sort of thing. I don't think that would happen without the social enterprise place status. One of the things which has been really interesting for us recently is that the neighbouring borough in Greater Manchester to us, which is Wigan. They are, I think, the newest social enterprise place. I think I'm right in saying that. Fantastic for us because they're right next door to us. I'm really looking forward to working with them, and we worked with them for a few years before they submitted it. But one of the things they've referred to the place's status as is a kite mark. So almost a kind of validation that the work that they are doing is good and it's effective and that it works. And I think that's been really fascinating for us. It wasn't how we looked at it in Salford, but that's exactly what they've done. And yeah, really excited that we're next door to each other and to see what comes now over, I think it must be 5 years since Tracy was in Salford at our launch. Yeah, really excited to see what happens over the next 2 or 3 years. And I know I hope I've rushed through that. But yeah, that's for me, hopefully a good summary. So hopefully that works for you guys too.
No, that's great. And, you know, talking of nicking ideas, we're all for nicking ideas. I like to think of it as sharing rather than pinching. But we're very much, I think, nicked the whole idea of social enterprise places from SE UK as well. So very much into that ethos of learning from others and nicking their ideas. So thank you.
It's flattery.
Absolutely. You know, there's so much we're already, I think, hearing in today's session. I mean, we've got some strong networks here in Scotland already, even pre-places, but how can we really build on that to influence agendas is really important. Thank you so much. And I want to make sure we've got time for questions at the end, because I know I've got some, and I'm sure our attendees will. I'm paying homage to, someone's just commented. So here we are. We're going to pay homage to what's happening in the Midlands, an area I'm always passionate to hear about. You probably can tell from my accent. It's part of the world I grew up in. So really delighted to welcome Sarah to today's session, and particularly interested, I think, given in kind of the places we've looked at so far in terms of Scotland. I think we've got we've got Uist and Lewis, which are very rural, but we're also looking at Govan as a one to watch, which is part of Glasgow. So really interested as well to hear about a bit of that story of kind of, we know that Birmingham is now a social enterprise place, but it also started in terms of that smaller area of Digbeth and kind of built momentum. So really looking forward to hearing about places from your area. So over to you, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm absolutely passionate about places and really feel strongly that they can have a massive impact on the growth of the sector. I wanted to just kick off by saying that I run a social enterprise development organisation located in Digbeth in Birmingham. I think that the whole work around places came about because there were no resources for social enterprise development, and we needed another approach that was from the sector, for the sector, to enable organisations to grow. I think it's important for you to know a little bit about the background. The city has a legacy of social enterprise activity and philanthropy, a bit like you have in Scotland. But unfortunately, we don't have any resources coming through in terms of the development, the need to support the development activities. We're an area of very, very diverse communities in the city, with now 50% BAME residents, lots of urban poverty, social, economic and environmental issues, and much aggravated by COVID. But Birmingham's thriving. We've got lots of cranes, building work, HS2, Commonwealth Games and so on. And we've also got lots of stakeholders wanting to support the sector, but not with any money. So it's a challenging environment, and that's not really changed since 2014 when we started doing this development work. Why do I think it's important? I'm coming a bit really from an economic development perspective. I think it provides an alternative approach to economic development. And I think that it's important that we get the economic function of social enterprise recognised. So we now know that in terms of the economy in the West Midlands, we contribute 3.5 billion in turnover. And that's enabled us to get a seat at the table around the discussions and support for building social enterprise into the general strategic work that's going on around the region and the city. I think that having place-based support generally maximises opportunities to work with, I'm going to call them anchor organisations, but the big organisations that can buy from us, create employment opportunities and provide support for the sector, like universities, like hospitals, like local authorities, police and so on. And it gives us a way in or a seat at the table. It provides a platform for partnership working and identifying solutions for sector needs and maximising the opportunities that are out there. But primarily, it enables us to support social enterprise growth. So for both of our places, we're really keen to grow the sector. That's our mission around turnover and numbers of social enterprise awareness. But the thing that we've ended up having to do a lot of work on is raising awareness of social enterprise, because no one seems to be really doing that regionally. And that's one of the primary functions of our places. And then the other stuff follows on. It kind of gives us access to resources for research and development. And it also gives us access to strategic partners, someone to contact, and gives us an authenticity in the conversations. So we've got two places, Digbeth Social Enterprise Quarter, which started in 2014. And that's a tiny area of a square mile with over 70 social enterprises in one place. And that came about because we needed to find ways of introducing peer support for organisations, because we'd run out of funding, because government made changes and cut funding in terms of business support. And as an output or an impact of that directly, we've seen organisations increase their turnover of between 10 and 20%, because we've been able to introduced them to business opportunities, introduced them to partners and so on. So they've been able to kind of self-help themselves. And I think that's a huge, huge opportunity for larger areas and smaller areas. Since then, we've registered Birmingham as a social enterprise city in 2018. We've then seen a catalogue of other activities going on. So we've got a West Birmingham regeneration zone and a cluster of social enterprises there. And then smaller clusters of 8, 10, 12 social enterprises working collaboratively across the city. And we're just about to do some work in East Birmingham, where there will be resources to help us grow that sector there, where there's an absolute dearth of social enterprises. At the moment, we're in contact with about 800 social enterprises across the city. So there have been challenges. It's been hard. The biggest challenge is lack of resources. What that means is that we're not funded, and how we work doing this work is to work through partners and organisations give their time for free. We have a group of organisations that come together, and that's kind of really important. And that's our kind of real key issue, I think, lack of resources and trying to manage. I want to talk very briefly about impact and say that I think the things that we've been really successful at doing across the two areas, obviously it's very different working in a city to a smaller area. Citywide, the work's much more strategic. The Digbeth Social Enterprise work is much more hands-on and operational. So generally the impact has been, it's enabled us to bring together large and small social enterprises, public sector, private sector, universities, mainstream business support, finance organisations, because it's a big city and it's hard to join up. And we've seen over years where people work in their own silos and don't link up. But having this combined agenda of growing the sector has been extremely powerful. Another big success is that to address awareness raising of social enterprise and how people can engage with it, we've started to run a social enterprise drive, which we began 8 years ago. And that was to tell people, explain to people what social enterprises are and how they can engage with it so that they can. So we have 5 calls to action: start one, work in one, invest in one, buy from one, work in one. And we're currently, just next week, we've got it, so it's flat out at the moment, but we've had over 250,000 hits through social media, and we're working in partnership with the sector to deliver 21 events over next week. And so we do one push, not all the time, but we find that that's the most effective way to use our time. Through the Bi-Social project that Jon mentioned, we've been working with Social Enterprise UK and other partners around the country. And that's very important, because if we're going to increase turnover, we need to enable people to access new market opportunities. So over the last year, we've made introductions worth 1.3 million in terms of contract value that have resulted in £400,000 worth of business for social enterprises. We want to see that continue to grow. And actually, a challenge is at the moment we can introduce them to more opportunities than the sector are able to cope with. We've worked with private and public sector on maximising social value, so that, again, that creates new business opportunities. And generally, we're always looking to measure the impact we're having in terms of increasing turnover as best we can. We are also rolling out clusters and places work across the combined authority, our West Midlands combined authority region, as part of writing a social enterprise strategy. And that's actually being written by a team that have come together as a consortium that are being employed by the combined authority to write this strategy. So you can hear with this some very operational stuff and then some very strategic stuff, which we see is our function in terms of our social enterprise place. It's a marvellous thing, I think, working in places. It gives you opportunities to learn from one another nationally and also internationally, share ideas, sort out some of the challenges, get support. And I think because we're all working to the same agenda of growing the sector, I think it really gives us opportunities to well, as I've said already, to learn from one another. I think it also that those links and joint working are extremely valuable, especially when it's a difficult time. And I think the challenges that we've had over the last year to understand how people are addressing social inclusion, economic inclusion, and some of those kind of things are very, very helpful. One of our biggest challenges is data. We're not in the position, as you are in Scotland, to do big mapping exercises and haven't had the resources. As I've said, we're doing things very much from a grassroots perspective. And that's a big challenge. We need to do more work on that, and we're lobbying hard with our combined authority that they take on that role. So they also currently have an ambition of doubling the turnover from 3.5 billion to 7 billion in 10 years, and that's the strategy that we're writing. So that will have to be underpinned by data so that we can really prove the impact that we're having. But I genuinely believe that in terms of places activity, the data and the evidence that prove what you're doing is going to be the kind of magic, the magic that tells people how great they are. Thanks very much.
Thank you again. So I've got so many comments and points I've written down. You know, as you were talking about kind of anchor organisations, I think again very much about the community wealth building agenda that's going on here in terms of actually buying and supporting. And I've got quite a few questions, and I can see questions starting to come through in the chat. So if I can, I'll invite all of our kind of speakers back in. If you've got anything to ask Gareth, I suggest you pretty much post your question in now, because he may just have to leave us. But just while you're doing that, quickly, if there is anything, just a comment, I guess, from me, and it's a question maybe to Sarah first up. You talked a bit more about, obviously, that data, but that sense of really making the economic development point. Do you think we should speak more about that kind of economic impact? We always speak about social impact. It's our core. What difference do you think the economic has really made in terms of how your message has been taken on, perhaps by the broader stakeholder community?
I think it's really important. I think they're equally important, but I actually think we don't talk enough about the economic impact that we have. I know Gareth, you know, and Jon both believe the same thing that I'm talking about. But actually, if we're going to be taken serious as a business, we as an enterprise, social enterprises, we trade, and we make a considerable impact on local economies. And yet we don't seem to be being taken seriously by the business agencies. And we still fall between kind of social and business, and no one quite knows who just, you know, how we get support and so on. So I think the economic development bit is really important, but the data is the key to that. We really need to understand what the contributions are and what difference we're making.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, we are lucky, I think, here that we have a census that takes place every 2 years, and it gives us a really good indication in terms of what's going on in social enterprise. And we know that's getting updated this year, and I think it does help. I just wondered if there's just any final comments just from Gareth, just before you leave us, about kind of the places programme you want to make, and then I'll come back with a few more questions that have come in, I think, both to Jon and to Sarah in the chat. So, Gareth, just any final comments from you before you may have to duck out?
Yeah, firstly, just reflecting on that economic data question. I mean, I think going back to 2012-13, for us, it was the economic data that made the big difference. Getting seriously credible with the council was to say, there are this many social enterprises, they're worth this much of the economy, there's this many jobs. And the places movement has helped that grow, and I think that's a really powerful stat. And I think, but you're quite right. You know, I mean, in some respects, we probably don't talk about the social impact as much as we should in Plymouth. We tend to focus a lot on the economic impact. And, you know, 20% of the economy in Plymouth is probably, if you include universities, housing, college, housing agencies, and the voluntary sector, is probably in the social economy. So, and I think people, I think Sarah mentioned it, that raising that awareness. You know, someone's got to carry the sort of like flag for that, and it's the networks and the social enterprise, sort of like particularly that infrastructure those organisations that then do the work on the places movement that do that. And I think one of the things I sort of see across the places network is where there's really good infrastructure and really good, well-supported networks and business communities, the social enterprise movement is strong. It starts to flourish. You know, that leadership is really powerful. But very few people, particularly this last year, we found in COVID, there's very few people investing in that, and that's a real challenge. But anyway, just my final sort of comment is, if you're out there thinking about whether your place should or could become a social enterprise place, the simple answer is just do it. Number one tip is get some good data on what activity is going on in your area. I mean, the places movement is supposed to be about hotspots of social enterprise activity. It's, you know, Clive Hurst, who was the sort of the founder of the idea, if he was here, he would say he based it on the fair trade town model. I think it's a really powerful flag for us as a movement to sort of like shine a light on what we're doing across the country, and that solidarity and internationally as well. It's really powerful. You know, we are proving we're making a difference, and we can hopefully do more as a movement.
Thank you so much, Gareth. And we know placemaking is certainly, it's a lingo that's getting used more and more. So thank you so much for your contribution today. It's been really great. And I'll put up a link in the chat while we're just doing the next questions, just in terms of for those organisations in Scotland that want to apply to be a place, where to find out more information. In essence, it's probably me you have to speak to about applications. So do contact me and put a note in the chat if that's what you want to do. Jon, a question's come in that was perhaps focused on you. You talked about the place's accolade, almost hoping to inspire, I guess, more social entrepreneurs and other people that come forward, and empowering more people to set up social enterprise. And someone's asked, could you talk a little bit more just about that? Were there any particular themes that came forward? And obviously picking up on that support side, did then the local network do the support, or did it enable you to just identify who those up and coming social entrepreneurs were and then signpost them onto where they could get the support? Just a bit more around that would be brilliant. Oh, you're on mute.
First time I've done that, actually. So, yeah, I would say, before I answer that question about, I mean, this sort of stuff happens when you just start talking about things. So that as soon as Media City was talked about in Salford, we saw an influx of people who wanted to set up companies in, you know, digital and creative. And yeah, once we started to get our heads together, maybe it's because we just noticed it a bit more because we were talking about it rather than there was actually an increase. But yeah, for sure, lots of people coming to us to talk about social enterprise and actually understanding what it is as well. I know that it is still, for us, as the others have said, a huge challenge raising awareness around social enterprise. The question about young people, we see a huge amount of young people talking about social enterprise, and they really, really understand it. We worked on some kind of research project with the University of Salford, I think, about the desire of graduates to do what sort of job they wanted to go into, what sort of role they wanted to do, and they are much more likely to think about the social impact of any kind of venture that they're involved in. In terms of what it looked like around startups, it was often, you would see lots of people who've been personally affected by something. So it could be something around social care, where a member of their family had been affected by it. It could be a particular illness that they had. It could be an issue within their community, be that litter, vandalism, kids hanging around smoking weed, anything along those lines. It was often something which had personally affected them. I would like to think that the reason it increased was because we were clearer between ourselves as a business group and Salford CVS as a community and voluntary support organisation about who was best to speak to around support. And I would like to think it helped CVS as well to sort of realign their support stuff, so it went a bit more business focused rather than community focused as well. I hope that answers the question.
No, really helpful, and I can already see there's loads of really useful resources that our speakers are putting links up to in the chat for people that want to know a bit more about kind of local campaigns. So just pointing that out, Jon, so that if you wanted to add anything to it, feel free. No pressure, of course. Just conscious that you may not have done that while you were speaking. I wanted to just, Sarah, you spoke a little bit in terms of perhaps that balance between the kind of the provision of the hands-on support and then the strategic side. And to me, that was really interesting because we know that our social enterprises, some are incredibly small and want to perhaps just stay small, and some have that ambition for growth. And what was quite interesting to me when you talked about that, the sense of either whether you're providing the kind of the hands-on support or enabling that voice and the strategic partnerships, has that enabled you therefore to kind of, I guess, support all elements on that spectrum of the social enterprise, different types of organisations, from the very small to those that are larger? And has it enabled those groups to come together a bit more under something that's unified? Because I think sometimes we have a little bit of that tension between those ones that are very ambitious and high growth, and we have the very grassroots organisations. So I just wanted to say, if you've got just a few thoughts about kind of how you've brought those different ends of the spectrum together.
So we cut our teeth on the Digbeth Social Enterprise Quarter, square mile, 70 organisations. And we've always worked in partnership. So located within that area were Unlimited, School for Social Entrepreneurs, Locality were nearby. So all of the different organisations that have been, that are involved in growing the sector in terms of providing support are involved in our partnership. And so we feel that we can, direct people into different organisations, and it's worked really well. And you'd think it would be dreadful, because you'd think you'd be in competition, but actually I think the strength has been the partnership. And even and also more recently we've had our local economic partnership that's got involved, who are doing the kind of growth work. So we're able to provide everything from awareness raising to someone who's got an idea or a twinkle in their eye, all the way through to an organisation that wants to get social investment and pull in partners that are around the table. So I think that's the challenge, and we've been able to do that then at a larger scale, because we learned doing it at a smaller scale through the Birmingham Social Enterprise City Network as well. I think, though, if I'm very honest, I'm always very honest, this last year has been a lot more challenging to partnership working, and that we've got some ground to make up in terms of re-establishing those links and so on. And I think also the social enterprises have been looking a lot internally rather than externally, just to manage and cope. So
yeah, it's been a challenging year, hasn't it? And I think some have moved very quickly into partnerships, and some move very quickly into just kind of going, oh my God, how do we just survive this? And depending on what sector you work in, I think that's been very different for different organisations.
I think there's been a bit of a shift, though, and I think the shift is that there's less resources around, and that organisations, there's less support around for startup. And the shift at the moment is to focus resources on growth, so that those organisations can grow and create more social value. So although we know we need a supply of the smaller ones coming through, I think there's more of a shift now on the kind of growth side, and that's coming through our combined authority as well.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I was just, that growth side's quite, I think we always see a lot of focus, I think, on social enterprise growth. That's why I wanted to pick up on that question in terms of the grassroots side as well, because for me, Places has to be about all of those things, not just about one or the other. What creates our Places is some of the big anchor organisations or the big social enterprises, and some of those very localised initiatives. And I think it's keeping the balance between the two that's important. I wanted to perhaps take a slightly different tack with questions. Procurement, it's always a big challenge, I think, that's put out there for lots of social enterprises. Do you think that coming together and that Places agenda has enabled you to influence the procurement process in your local area, or create a sense of learning, I guess, where more people feel comfortable and confident going through traditional procurement processes? Or do you think we've still got, again, a way to go on that? Just a question, because it's often cited, I guess, as one of the real key barriers for many social enterprises. And I'll go perhaps to Jon and then to Sarah, so you get a little bit of a breather, Sarah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess it has. We in Salford CVS have led something called a 10% Better campaign, and they have led the work with the council around social value and putting that into contracts and tendering and how they work with social enterprises. We've spent just over 12 months working on the Bi-Social local expansion project, and part of that has been trying to work not just with our local council but with our combined authority at a slightly higher level to get them to change their procurement practices so that it's easier for social enterprises to win contracts. But we will always hear from commissioners, and particularly within the NHS, that those smaller social enterprises do not have the systems and procedures in place to be suitable to go for those kind of contracts. So we had, even before, or maybe at the beginning of our Places scheme, but I can't say it was the Places stuff that helped this work progress, because it probably wasn't, but we had a third sector consortium in Salford. And I think it's the last remaining one in Greater Manchester. And that was where people came together as a kind of cooperative to pitch for larger contracts. Alison and CVS have led all of that work. And one of the reasons for that is I think I'm less interested in the council's social value metrics and measurement, and what I'm interested in is those massive contracts being broken down into smaller contracts so they are suitable for social enterprises to bid for. And one of the things which we're pushing with our council and with other large commissioners is for every contract that they publish, which is ginormous, take either 1% or 10% of that and do a smaller contract alongside it. Obviously that's more difficult for them because it means more admin, which is not really what they're interested in. But I think that's where I would rather we got to, rather than, oh, well done, you've improved what you're looking for in terms of social value.
Yeah, no, I mean, that procurement and that contract size, I think, has always been a key issue. I've been around social enterprise for a good 25 years now, and I used to work in the waste and recycling sector, and it was fascinating and really soul destroying to some degree that for me lots of the innovation came from our sector, but then as it all went mainstream the contracts became too big, and you don't see very much now in that kind of waste and recycling sector because they simply got pushed out of the market because of contract size. And I think that's such a shame. And how do we get that environment kind of working better, I think? And it's not just social enterprises, it's often a lot of SMEs can't bid for those contracts as well. So that local economic impact that we started our conversation about is critical really in terms of small business and social enterprise and procurement, I think. So Sarah, have you found it's kind of made a difference from a procurement side where you are, or again, do you take the same view that actually the procurement agenda needs a much more fundamental shake-up?
We've got a lot of we've had a lot of success in terms of consortiums, and we've got some really big ones, and we're very active at encouraging organisations that we see have an alignment with existing consortiums in terms of introductions. They're both in, the two really big ones are both in health and social care, and they actually are part of our steering group, which is very helpful in terms of connectivity and partnership working. More generally, we've done a lot of work on the supply chain side of procurement, because we see that social enterprises can win contracts at tier 2 level, so further down the supply chain. A lot of the big big companies that are winning contracts often have social value champions in them, and we can't seem to get close to them in terms of influencing, but we can influence further down. And that's where we've had the success in terms of linking up social enterprises into opportunities. I think that the new legislation in England around social value and the inclusion of, as one of the criteria of percentage of contract spend with social enterprises, is really going to help us, but it's not there yet. It only came through in January, and I'm really, really hopeful that social enterprises are going to have great opportunities, going forward.
Thank you. I guess it's that sense of the places, or the network has enabled collaboration perhaps a little more easily, has been the bonus. I'm conscious that we've kind of got 2 minutes left of our session, and I just want to know before I leave that people are clear if they're looking to apply to the Places programme, they know how to. And then I was just going to come back to you both for just a final comment or reflection just on the Places programme. So just a little bit from me. I have shared in the chat the link to apply to become a place in Scotland. So far our places are Uist, Lewis and Governors, one to watch. So we've got some very small rural communities as part of our challenge so far, and a part of a city. But this is really a programme that here in Scotland we've designed so that you tell us what your place is. you define the size. We're interested in kind of groups, but we're interested in impact, and we're really trying to get you on the map. We wanted to run this session today because we're always asked what difference will the Places programme make. So I just thought I'd share with you a couple of things in the offering here that we're just about to do, both for UIST and Lewis. We're about to produce PDF brochures for them on case studies of organisations in their area, so they can start to use that as promotional tools when they go out to their local authorities or are trying to promote what's happened in their area. So we're working with them on all of that. We're looking to get more of our web resources, and I think as we move forward, certainly SE UK have been incredibly inviting to me in terms of making the links with people in the existing Places programme. I think it's that shared learning that we'd love to build on more as we move forward. So if you do want to become a social enterprise place, our deadline, we do 2 deadlines a year. And we've got one coming up at the end of April. The next one is the end of September. I'll drop my email in the chat just while Sarah and Jon are giving us their final reflections, but we'd love to get more kind of areas on the map. We know there's lots of great hotspots there all over Scotland, and we'd really love to work with you on promoting that as well. So just a final reflection then from both Jon and then Sarah, just in terms of the Places programme and the role of social enterprise.
So I think one thing I would like to say, I don't know if it's a reflection or not, but I would say just get on with it, start that process. So we spent about a year before we applied for social enterprise place status, and that really helped us to identify who was important, who was providing good business support, what sort of sectors were we dealing with, what type of person was out there, and it helps in our everyday work, and it helps CVS with ours as well. So yeah, I would say get stuck in, and I'm happy, Naomi, for you to share my contact details. I'm happy to help anyone review an application or do whatever we can to support them as well. And thank you very much for having us along today. Cheers.
Thank you so much, Jon. Really generous, and thank you. It's been great to hear from you. Sarah?
I just want to say that you've heard some brilliant examples this morning. But actually, a social enterprise place should reflect your place and your needs. And what we've described to you is what reflects our needs. And smaller areas, what a great opportunity to collaborate with other social enterprises and trade with one another, boost your businesses and market together and save, time and energy by doing it as a group. Go for it. And thanks again for inviting me.
No, thank you. That's great. And again, the place, I agree completely with you. This is why we're leaving it for areas to define what they want from the programme. Tell us how we can support you. We're not telling you what we'll do. We want to hear from you what you need. So it's really important we get that right, I think. So thank you so much to all our speakers today. I've noticed there's one question I didn't cover, which was just what was your 5th call to action? I think that was volunteer. So just in case the person who asked that question thinking, is she ever going to get to mine? That was the 5th one. And I've already noted that down. I thought that was a great campaign to get more people involved in social enterprise. So I already feel like I'm leaving today's session with another nickable idea. So thank you very, very much. Really great you could join us today, and thank you for your time.